Sir, she's foreman of construction.
Shooter, here, on my authority.
The Holocaust was one of the most terrible and deplorable catastrophes of the 20th century.
Was these millions of civilians who'd been deported against their will. I don't know where you could have lived in Germany and not seen forced laborers.
It is largely assumed that the genocide killed 11 million civilians, including 6 million Jews. Join us as we look at the horrific entertainment by the Nazis in concentration camps during World War II. 15. The abuse of little prisoners. Children were particularly vulnerable during the Holocaust. The Nazis encouraged the murder of children from unwanted or dangerous groups, either as part of the racial struggle or as a kind of preventative security. Children were executed by the Germans and their collaborators for ideological reasons, as well as in reprisal for actual or suspected partisan attacks. Nazi Germany and its collaborators murdered approximately 1.5 million Jewish children, tens of thousands of Romani Gypsy children, 5,000 to 7,000 German children with physical and mental disabilities living in institutions, and many Polish children and children living in the German-occupied Soviet Union. Jewish and non-Jewish adolescents had a better chance of surviving since they might be utilized for forced labor. Some children were immediately killed when they arrived at killing centers or became part of the workforce if they were old enough. Jewish children died in ghettos due to malnutrition, sickness, and a lack of proper clothes and shelter. The German authorities ignored the alarming fatality rates. They believed the majority of the younger ghetto youngsters to be unproductive, hence, useless eaters, because children were often too young to be exploited for forced labor. German authorities frequently chose them, along with the elderly, ill, and crippled, for the earliest deportations to killing centers, or as the first victims to be slain in mass graves. 14. Medical experiments. From 1933 to 1945, Nazi Germany waged a drive to cleanse German society of those deemed biological dangers to the country's health. To design racial health programs, the Nazis solicited the aid of physicians, as well as medically educated geneticists, psychiatrists, and anthropologists. These programs began with mass sterilization of many people in hospitals and other institutions, and culminated in the near extinction of European Jewry. Many experiments in the camps were designed to help Axis military members survive in the field. German scientists used prisoners as guinea pigs in high-altitude studies to establish the maximum altitude at which injured aircraft crews might parachute to safety. Scientists there also conducted so-called freezing experiments on convicts in search of an effective therapy for hypothermia. Prisoners were also tested on various methods for making seawater drinkable. Other research was intended to discover and test medications and treatment methods for injuries and diseases sustained by German military and occupation soldiers in the field. The most infamous were Joseph Mengele's experiments on twins of various ages at Auschwitz. Scientists investigated several ways to establish an effective and affordable procedure for mass sterilization. Nazi officials regarded Jews, Roma, and other populations as ethnically or genetically unacceptable. 13. Entertainment over the condemned and adult prisoner. Because Jews were the primary targets of the Nazi Holocaust, the victims of the extermination camps were predominantly Jewish. Other people from various origins might be found in the hundreds of forced labor and concentration camps that did not have gassing facilities. Prisoners were obliged to wear color-coded triangles on their jackets so that camp guards and authorities could quickly identify everyone's background and pit the various groups against one another. Political prisoners, such as communists, socialists, and trade unionists, wore red triangles, whereas those the Germans deemed asocial or shiftless wore black triangles. Jehovah's Witnesses wore purple ones, while gay men and those imprisoned for homosexuality had to wear pink triangles. The Germans and their accomplices spared no women or children, Jewish or non-Jewish, when carrying out mass murder operations. The Nazi philosophy advocated the total elimination of all Jews, regardless of age or gender. In our thumbnail, we can see the humiliation and suffering inmates had to endure while providing entertainment for Nazi soldiers. 12. Slave labor. During World War II, Nazi Germany and all German-occupied Europe used slave and forced labor at unprecedented levels. It was an essential component of the German economic exploitation of captured areas. It also contributed to the widespread annihilation of communities in occupied Europe. The Germans kidnapped almost 12 million individuals from nearly 20 European countries. Approximately two-thirds migrated from Central and Eastern Europe. The living conditions of many workers led to their deaths. Extreme mistreatment, severe starvation, and abuse were the leading reasons of death. Throughout the war, numerous civilians were killed because of enemy bombing and shelling of their workplaces. At the zenith of the program, forced laborers made up 20% of the German labor force. Including fatalities and turnover, approximately 15 million men and women were forced laborers at some point throughout the conflict. Aside from Jews, Belarusians, Ukrainians, and Russians faced the toughest deportation and forced labor practices. By the end of the conflict, half of Belarus's population had been slain or deported. The collapse of Nazi Germany in 1945 liberated about 11 million foreigners, the majority of whom were forced laborers and POWs. During the war, German soldiers transported into the Reich 6.5 million civilians, in addition to Soviet POWs, for forced labor in industries. In total, 5.2 million foreign laborers and POWs were repatriated to the Soviet Union, 1.6 million to Poland, 1.5 million to France, 900,000 to Italy, and 300,000 to 400,000 to Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, the Netherlands, Hungary, and Belgium. 11. Extermination of Romani people. The Romani Holocaust, also known as the Romani Genocide, was Nazi Germany's premeditated endeavor to perpetrate ethnic cleansing and finally, genocide against European Roma and Sinti peoples during the Holocaust. On November 26, 1935, Adolf Hitler issued a supplementary proclamation to the Nuremberg Laws, categorizing the Romani people as enemies of the race-based state, thereby putting them in the same category as Jews. Thus, the destiny of the Roma in Europe resembled that of the Jews during the Holocaust. Historians believe that Nazi Germans and their collaborators killed between 250,000 and 500,000 Romani and Sinti, accounting for 25% to more than 50% of Europe's estimated population of little less than 1 million Roma at the time. Later studies quoted by Ian Hancock estimated the death toll at 1.5 million of the estimated 2 million European Roma. In 1982, West Germany legally acknowledged that Nazi Germany perpetrated genocide against the Romani people. 10. Boxing and sports team. Concentration and extermination camps were micro-societies typified by inequality. The SS ruled over many captives who were either slaughtered upon arrival or died of hunger and ill treatment, while the privileged had far better living conditions. The way the SS exploited the potential of prisoners with boxing talents for training reasons and boxing tournaments demonstrates their own corporal culture, which was itself a result of the tight order and discipline imposed on German society by the Nazi regime through sport. Concentration camp inmates' bodies were merely tools for ideological and recreational objectives. Boxing proved to be an intriguing match for analyzing the social structure of concentration camps. Boxing was a leisure activity and a power game for some, a source of income for others, a form of torture for the prisoners who were the underdogs, and a means for a small minority to escape their plight. It also provided a chance to highlight the linkages that existed between body control and destruction, as well as survival and endurance. 9. Selections and gas chambers. When deportation trains arrived at the killing facilities, guards directed the deportees to exit and form a line. The victims then underwent a selection process. Men were separated from women and children. A Nazi, usually an SS physician, quickly assessed everyone to see whether he or she was healthy and strong enough for forced work. This SS commander then gestured to the left or right. The victims were unaware that they were being chosen to survive or die. Babies and small children, pregnant women, the elderly, people with impairments, and the sick stood a slim chance of surviving the first selection. Those chosen to die were pushed into gas vans or gas chambers. To avert fear, camp guards informed the victims that they would take showers to get rid of lice. The guards told them to turn over all their possessions and undress. Then they were driven naked into the showers. A guard shut and locked the doors. In certain killing facilities, carbon monoxide was piped into the chamber. In others, camp guards flung Zyklon B, a very deadly insecticide also used to eliminate rats and insects. Usually, within minutes of entering the gas chambers, everyone inside died from a lack of oxygen. Under guard, prisoners were forced to transport the corpses to an adjacent chamber, where they were stripped of their hair, gold teeth, and fillings. The bodies were cremated or buried in mass graves. Many people benefited from the plundering of corpses. Camp guards grabbed some of the gold, while the rest was melted down and put in an SS bank account. Private businesses purchased and processed the hair to manufacture a variety of items, including ship rope and mattresses. 8. Dehumanizing tattooing. Incoming convicts were assigned a camp serial number, which was embroidered onto their prison clothing. Only convicts chosen for employment were assigned serial numbers. Those transported directly to the gas chambers were not registered and received no tattoos. Initially, the SS marked inmates in the infirmary or about to be executed with their camp serial number on the breast in indelible ink. As captives were executed or killed in other ways, the clothing with the camp serial number was removed. Given the camp's death rate and the practice of removing clothing, the bodies could not be identified once they were taken. As a result, the SS authorities instituted tattooing as a method of identifying the bodies of deceased registered prisoners. Originally, a specific metal stamp with replaceable numerals formed of needles about a centimeter long was employed. This permitted the prisoner's whole serial number to be pounded in one hit to the left upper chest. Ink was then applied to the bleeding wound. When the metal stamp approach became unworkable, a single needle device was devised to puncture the contours of the serial number digits into the skin. The tattoo location was relocated to the outer side of the left forearm. However, detainees from numerous transports in 1943 had their numbers tattooed on the inside of their left upper forearms. Tattooing was typically done at registration when each prisoner was given a camp serial number. Prisoners taken directly to the gas chambers were never assigned numbers, hence they were never tattooed. 7. Forced abortions and infanticide. During World War II, Nazi Germany's abortion policy varied based on the people, group, and territory targeted, with German women barred from having abortions. The common goal of these measures was to increase the birth rate and population of the so-called Aryan race, while reducing the population of Jewish, Polish, and Roma women. Furthermore, those judged a burden on German society, such as the crippled or mentally ill, were subjected to forced abortion with subsequent sterilization, making them among the only Germans legally subjected to abortion. These testimonies have been categorized as part of Nazi Germany's systematic program of genocide, aimed at the destruction of foreign nations and ethnic groups. After the war, the Nuremberg trials found that Nazi society's practice of forced abortion against condemned groups was a war crime. Those who encouraged or enforced abortion during the Holocaust were punished to at least 25 years in jail, since their actions were deemed an inhumane act of extermination. 6. Book burning. In 1933, Nazi authorities sought to align professional and cultural organizations with Nazi ideology and policy. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi Minister for Popular Enlightenment and Propaganda, launched an initiative to align German arts and entertainment with Nazi goals. The government cleansed cultural organizations of Jewish and other leaders accused of being politically questionable, as well as those who performed or made art that Nazi ideologues deemed degenerate. On April 6, 1933, the Nazi German Student Association's main office for press and propaganda issued a statewide Action Against the Un-German Spirit, which culminated in a literary purge or cleansing by fire. Local chapters were tasked with providing press releases and commissioned pieces, offering blacklists of un-German authors, sponsoring well-known Nazi personalities to speak at public events, and negotiating radio broadcast times. On May 10, 1933, university students burnt upwards of 25,000 volumes of un-German books, ushering in an age of state censorship and cultural control. On the evening of May 10th, most university cities saw right-wing students march in torchlight marches against the un-German spirit. The planned rituals required high-ranking Nazi officials, professors, university rectors, and student leaders to address the participants and viewers. Students threw pillaged and unwanted books onto bonfires with great ceremony, band music, and so-called fire oaths at the gathering spots. The burning of books by the Nazi regime on May 10, 1933, is possibly the most well-known book burning event in history. 5. Youth organizations. Since the 1920s, the Nazi Party had targeted German youth as a unique audience for its propaganda themes. These messages stressed the party's youth-driven nature: vibrant, resilient, forward-thinking, and positive. Millions of German youth were converted to Nazism in the classroom and through extracurricular activities. The Hitler Youth had about 100,000 members in January 1933, but by the end of the year, the number had risen to more than 2 million. By 1937, membership in the Hitler Youth had grown to 5.4 million, before becoming mandatory in 1939. The German government then banned or dissolved competing youth organizations. Education in the Third Reich was designed to indoctrinate students with the National Socialist worldview. Nazi researchers and educators extolled Nordic and other Aryan races, while dismissing Jews and other so-called inferior peoples as parasitic, bastard races, incapable of fostering culture and civilization. After 1933, the Nazi authorities cleansed the public education system of teachers who were either Jewish or politically unreliable. Most educators, however, stayed in their positions and joined the National Socialist Teachers League. By 1936, the League had enrolled 97% of all public school instructors, or over 300,000 people. In fact, more teachers joined the Nazi Party than any other profession. In the classroom and among the Hitler Youth, the goal was to generate race-conscious, obedient, self-sacrificing Germans, eager to die for the Führer and the fatherland. Devotion to Adolf Hitler was an important aspect of Hitler Youth training. German Youth honored his birthday, which was a national holiday for membership inductions. German youths swore allegiance to Hitler, promising to serve the country and its leader as future soldiers. 4. Kidnapping of children. During World War II, about 200,000 ethnic Polish children, as well as unnamed children of other ethnicities, were taken from their homes and forcibly transported to Nazi Germany for forced labor, medical experimentation, or Germanization. The project's goal was to acquire and Germanize infants with alleged Aryan Nordic characteristics, as Nazi officials believed they were the descendants of German settlers who had emigrated to Poland. Those dubbed racially valuable were forced to adapt in centers before being adopted into German homes and SS home schools. In Germany, an organization called Stolen Children, Forgotten Victims advocates for victims of German kidnappings. 3. Killing centers. From 1933 until 1945, Nazi Germany maintained over 1,000 concentration camps, including subcamps on its own territory and in sections of German-occupied Europe. The first camps were formed in March 1933, just after Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Following the SA's 1934 purge, the concentration camps were managed entirely by the SS through the Concentration Camps Inspectorate and later, the SS Main Economic and Administrative Office. Initially, most inmates were members of the Communist Party of Germany, but as time passed, many groups were detained, including habitual criminals, asocials, and Jews. Following the outbreak of World War II, citizens from German-occupied Europe were imprisoned in concentration camps. Around 1.65 million people were registered as inmates in the camps, with almost 1 million dying while imprisoned. Most of the casualties happened in the second part of World War II, including at least 1/3 of the 700,000 inmates listed as of January 1945. Following Allied military victories, the camps were gradually released in 1944 and 1945, but hundreds of thousands of detainees died during the death marches. Many former concentration camps now house museums dedicated to the victims of the Nazi government, and the Nazi concentration camp system has become a global icon of murder and evil. 2. Screenings. Nazism made considerable use of movies throughout its history. Though it was a relatively new technology, the Nazi Party formed a film department shortly after gaining power in Germany. Adolf Hitler and his propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, exploited the many Nazi films to promote party philosophy and demonstrate their influence in the emerging art form, which Hitler was personally fascinated by. The Nazis saw film as a powerful propaganda tool, seducing the masses with slogans that spoke directly to people's instincts and emotions. The Department of Film also leveraged German moviegoers' economic power to shape the international film market. Almost all Hollywood producers censored films critical of Nazism throughout the 1930s, and Nazi-produced news shorts were shown in American theaters. 1. Persecution of black people. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazis took power in 1933, there were several thousand black people residing in Germany. The Nazi regime discriminated against them because they believed black people were racially inferior. During the Nazi era, the Nazis employed racial laws and policies to limit the economic and social potential of black people in Germany. They also harassed, imprisoned, sterilized, and killed an undetermined number of black individuals. The Nazis persecuted black people in Germany not only because of their color, but also for political reasons. For example, hilarious Larry Gilges was a black German dancer and communist activist from Düsseldorf, Germany. On June 20th, 1933, Nazis murdered him and left his body on the street. Gilges was murdered during the early months of the Nazi administration, as the Nazis wanted to crush the German communist movement. Nazi racial ideology penetrated every area of German life. Many Germans bought into this idea and openly discriminated against black people on their own initiative. As a result, it became more difficult for black people to find and hold jobs. Colleagues and supervisors were hesitant to work with people whose skin color distinguished them as outsiders inside the Nazi racial society. Firings, evictions, and destitution were commonplace. Some black people recall life in Nazi Germany as a time when strangers spat on them and called them racial slurs without consequence. Remembering these horrible times is awful, but people must know what happened so history never repeats itself. How do you feel about this? Why don't you let us know in the comments below? Well, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thank you for watching and see you next time.